corn gets a little bit taller, you won't be able to see exactly what's going on out here. So we thought we'd get out while the corn is still a little bit shorter so you can see what happened when we strip-tilled corn into last year's 200 plus bushel corn stalks.
Yeah, we had about 210 bushel corn out here last year, and we get a lot of comments about strip till that, oh, you can do it in soybean ground or you can do it in 100 bushel corn ground, but can you do it in 200 bushel corn residue? So in this particular field, it's a late planted field. We actually switched over some acres. We were going to plant beans here, but the price of corn got so good that I talked Darren into planting some corn out here late.
It was a hard discussion there. It wasn't too much of a decision when corn got to $5+, but then when it went over $7, wow, did it really look like a good decision.
But the whole thing is, every year guys are asking the question, well, how late can I plant? What can I do on my farm? We're willing to take a lot of chances on our farm. We're willing to do things that are different just so we can prove things right or wrong. And one of the things we've really experienced is some good yield gains with strip till over the last few years, and especially some cost savings on fertilizer. So anyway, this year in this particular field, we decided to go out here and strip till in the fall. We thought we were going to plant soybeans. We put a fair amount of fertility on. We were fertilizing for 70 bushel beans. That's enough P&K for 200 bushel corn. So come this spring, we looked at the corn price and said, well, instead of planting soybeans, let's plant continuous corn, but it's only strip tilled. Will it still work? Well, you can see by the stand that we've got here, things overall look pretty good, and we're dealing with an awful lot of residue. Again, we had about 210 bushel corn out here, but for the most part, the corn still looks real good.
When you're dealing with corn on corn, I don't care if it's strip till or conventional till or what you're doing, or no till especially, you've got all this residue out there, and it's really important to remember that corn stalks have about 60 parts carbon to every 1 part nitrogen. So for the soil bacteria to break them down, you have to get that relationship down to about a 12 or 13 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. So that means you're going to need some more nitrogen out there. Now when it comes to strip till, there are a lot of guys that want to go right after the combine, put a little bit of nitrogen right on top, and that's great. That will help break these stalks down. But one of the things that we've done on our farm with the stalks is, you see that some are still standing out here. We aren't necessarily cutting them right down to the ground. If you're going to cut things off low and you're going to chop everything up really well, that works great in most tillage situations. In strip till, some of it you can just leave up and out of your way too until you can get through real easy.
Well, when you start talking about nitrogen though, that's the real key when you're doing continuous corn. And I don't care if it's strip till, if it's no-till, if it's conventional till, you've got to have enough nitrogen out there. Just like Darren said, when you've got a high carbon to nitrogen ratio, there's all kinds of residue out here that's low in nitrogen. It's going to suck up some of the nitrogen that you apply, so that nitrogen doesn't go to your crop, it goes into breaking down last year's residue. That's one of the biggest problems with continuous corn.
So normally in corn, we're using about 9/10 of a pound of nitrogen per bushel of yield goal. In corn on corn, we're using about 1.2 pounds of nitrogen per bushel of yield goal. And I know I talked to a number of farmers this year that said, I was disappointed with my corn on corn yields. And I said, look, let's just look right at your nitrogen and see what you did. And in most cases, guys didn't vary their nitrogen approach very much, or if they had been cutting back in previous years, maybe they got up to that 9/10 or even 1 pound of nitrogen per bushel yield goal. And when you just calculate out, okay, well, if you use this is what your yield's going to be. In many cases, that's where we ended up. So 200 bushel corn guys that raised 170 bushel corn, we said, okay, look at how many pounds of nitrogen you put out, divide that by 1.2, and typically that's about what we got for yield.
So in other words, we're shooting for 200 plus bushels out here again this year. I stress the plus side. I'd like to have more than I did last year, if we could. And so that being said, we're putting out roughly 250 pounds of nitrogen. You've got to have a lot of extra nitrogen whenever you're going corn on corn.
Now to do that, you've got to have some fairly heavy soils. If you've got real light sandy soils and you say, I want to do 250 pounds of nitrogen, guess what? You're going to be out there several different times spoon-feeding it to the crop.
Even for us, we were not out here in one shot. We did it in 2 different applications. Granted, it wasn't that far apart or anything, but still we did split apply it. But anyway, getting back to the whole strip till thing, the main thing, and I don't care what crop you raised beforehand, whatever crop you plant, you want to have a nice seed bed. And that's difficult to do when you've got lots of residue, like all the residue that we had out here. You can see there's still a lot of residue left. And there was a thick mat out here of residue last year. We had a tremendous crop, so you got to fight through all that. With a good strip till machine, we were using a Case IH machine on our farm. We were able to do a pretty good job, and then we come along with our coulters this spring, and between those two things, I'm not going to say it's perfect out here, but it's definitely much better than what you're going to find in a lot of situations where guys are just trying to go no-till or just a little bit of light tillage in there. So I think for the most part we cleaned the rows fairly well. That's why you see a good stand right now.
However you do it, just keep in mind you've got to chop up that residue. You don't want hairpinning. You want a nice black strip so you get warmer in the spring and all those good things. Just keep those kind of things in mind if you're going to do corn on corn with strip till.
Anyway, we are pretty excited about strip till. We've had great success, especially when we're doing corn following soybeans or soybeans following corn. But in this particular case, we did corn on corn using strip till, and I think it's going to turn out great.
One of the nice things in this strip till approach, we're leaving quite a bit of corn stalk residue right in the middle of the row, and that helps shade out our weed of the week. Can you identify this tough weed?